My name is David Woods Bartley. So what I am going to share today is my story that involves horrific sexual trauma. Sexual trauma that was directed and rained down on me when I was just 12 years old. And the impact of that was not just in that moment, but really for the rest of my life. And I'm 61 years old at this point. So I am the youngest of four boys. My three older brothers are 6, 9, and 11 years older than I, and they are the single, well, it wouldn't be single, they are the best men I know. Our father, James Hamilton Bartley, unfortunately was a smoker, and that smoking took his life at just the tender young age of 41 years old, and I was just 7 when our father died. When my father died, my eldest brother, John, really at that point stepped in more as my dad than my brother. And he continues that role today. And he became an Eagle Scout. And so, of course, if my eldest brother is an Eagle Scout, well, then that's what I want to do. And so finally, right about 12 years old, I was in Boy Scouts. And brand new, and went to the first few meetings and was excited, and then something terrible happened. And the specifics were, I remember the evening like it happened yesterday. My mom dropped me off, my mother Suzanne, and right when she was getting ready to leave, an assistant scoutmaster who I didn't know real well because, again, I was still pretty new in this whole thing, had said to my mom, "Hey, Mrs. Bartley," and my mom turned around and she says, "Hey, you know what? I'm pretty clear. I'm pretty clear where you live. I have a good idea where you live, and that's right on my way home. If you like, I'm happy to take David home. You don't have to come back and get him." And so my mother was like, "Oh my gosh, thank you so much. We really appreciate that." And so the meeting goes on. We're talking. I don't remember exactly what we're talking about, but I had no idea how long it was going to take me. But you know what? At least I'm on the path. And that's a good thing. So it's time to go, and this assistant scoutmaster and I get in his car, and we're talking. We're talking about this upcoming camping trip. Now, I wasn't a real big outdoorsy kid, but the thought of going camping with all of the other scouts in this huge group and everything else, it was going to be amazing. We come up to a 4-way stop, and my house, and I know where I am, my house is this way, but instead of going that way, we turn to the right. Again, I'm at the bottom of the totem pole in terms of children in the family, and so I was a pretty compliant kid. It just didn't occur to me maybe to question, but I'm wondering. And so ultimately we go to a park. Well, at this point, it's dark, and we go into the parking lot, and we park, and I'm confused, but I'm anxious, but I'm not afraid. I'm with the scoutmaster. And so then he looks at me, and I will never forget that the energy, the feeling, like something was different. He looked at me and he said, "Get in the back." 12 years old, do what I'm told. And so I get out of the car. It doesn't occur to me to run away. Get out of the car and I get into the back seat. He comes around and gets in next to me. And then what he does is he takes me and he lays my body over his legs. And then he takes off my pants. And then he takes unlit, thank God, wooden matches. And he begins to insert them into my anus repeatedly, over and over and over and over. And then there's fondling. And this is all going on, and I'm laying across his legs, facing the rear door. My mind is blank. It's just like there's nothing there. And after whatever period of time, he stops, and then he orders me to get dressed. And then he tells me to get in the front seat, and I do, and he comes around and he gets in the front seat. And we drive, and we were so incredibly close to my house. And so we pull up, and I remember I'm going to jump out at this point, okay. And so he stops, and I'm literally hand on the door handle, and it's open. And I just jump out, and then he grabs me and spins me around until I'm like an inch, less than an inch in front of his face. And here's what he says: "David, what happened was an initiation, and all the boys go through it, but we never talk about it." And then he let me go. And so I remember I went in went inside, and I was greeted by my mom. And I'm sure she said something to the effect of, how was the meeting? And I'm sure I said something like, it's okay. And so there's another couple meetings, and he doesn't even offer to take me home. So now it's the camping trip. So I want to go. And so I go. And so figured there's safety in number. Like, there's no way anything could happen to me there. So, I'm enjoying and, feel safe and everything's okay. And then this scoutmaster, one of the evening, called me up to his tent. And there was another scout there. Well, yeah, okay, that's fine. So I go in, and as soon as I went in, Shannon, that other scout left. And the same thing happened. Right there. In and amongst all these people outside of the tent, I'm being sodomized right there. And when he's done, says the same thing. Same exact thing. What happened was an initiation, and all the boys go through it, but we never talk about it. When I came home from the camping trip, I told my mom, I don't want to be a Boy Scout. And I remember my mom was confused. She said, why? And quite honestly, Chen, I apologize. I don't remember what I said, but it was just whatever the higher power of me knew it's just going to happen again, so you can't go. I have fought crippling depression I'm 61, for basically 50 years. It started on that day in that car. I don't know how quickly after, but it became a repressed memory. And then I can tell you exactly where I was when I remembered it. So I was a resident assistant sitting in my dorm room at St. Mary's College of Maryland, and this thought came into my mind. Now, I need to say, I'm not a scary movie guy. Like, I don't look at stuff that's, extreme. So when I had this thought about being sodomized, at first I'm like, where in the hell is this coming from? And I'm awake. I'm not asleep. So it's not like it's a bad dream. Why am I having this thought? I finally realized, dear God, this happened to me. So I'd been from 12 to 20, like 8 years, basically, that I didn't think about it at all. And all of a sudden now, it's a truth. I remember it. And I have to think, like, how do I accept that as part of my history of being alive on this earth? That took a very long time. I didn't tell anybody. Dear God, I'm not going to tell. Why would I tell somebody? I have to reconcile what happened to me. And I didn't have it's still, it's 61 years old. I hate my body. Hate it. I am a master at avoiding looking in the mirror. I never sleep without a shirt on. And I've had incredible therapists, great support groups, lots of wonderful, 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 wonderful people in my life who have partnered with me to help get past this. And so I function and high functioning and this part still exists. I'm 61 and there's part of me that thinks, come on, man, you should be over this by now. I've worked really, really hard to get over it. And it's that the fight with depression, August 31st, 2011, tried to kill myself. And thank God, saved. I might have been in my 40s. It was a long time. And of course, my beloved mother, my mom was an amazing woman. She, wanted to protect her baby. I'm her baby. I had already talked about, she knew about the depression and, suicide attempt and things like that, but I had not shared this part. And she wanted to take it away from me and wanted to heal the wound. Now there's another monster, and that monster is depression. So it is just as evil as this other thing. And there's a great chef, David Chang, and Chef Chang fights bipolar, and he has this incredible statement. It says, when you're depressed, you're convinced that everything you think is true. So I just chef. I hope one day to meet him and just think, wow, that is just like, yes. When someone puts into words an experience that you're having, you're just like, oh, dear God. And so I don't share all this self-hatred. Now, depression, genetics, trauma, boom. when you're depressed, everything you think is true, and then things just snowball. I was the last person in the world you would think would be depressed. Certainly the last person in the world you would think would be suicidal. And what happened was I was going to jump off the 730-foot tall Forest Hill Bridge. And I was leaning over, about to fall. Somebody saw me, called 911, sheriff's deputy came, and he didn't make contact. He created connection. And in the work that I do now, in the talks that I give, what I tell at the foundation is that connection creates hope, and hope saves lives. And I was taken off the bridge to an emergency room. Now I'm going to go do 15 days in a psych ward. There's no way. And really what confused him is at the time I was married to an amazing woman who, thank God, is still a great friend of mine, an incredible supporter. Deanna and I, we ran an animal sanctuary. And the sanctuary was called A Chance for Bliss, home, Shannon, to literally as many as 100 animals at any one time. We were end of life. We were a hospice. We didn't know what options. We took the ones nobody wanted. And on June 2nd, 2010, we were the half-page cover story in the life section of USA Today. And 14 months later, you know where I was? On a dark spot, on a tall, tall bridge, about to kill myself. I remember the first question he asked me, David, what does it feel like to be depressed? I remember being just shocked by the question. It was an amazing question. And then I shared, and you know what he did? God love me. Just listen. And then we continued the conversation back and forth about what is it like to be with this condition. And then at one point he said, would you please come with me? And I said, okay. And there, to emergency room, and then to 15 days in the psych ward, which was an incredibly positive experience. I have psychiatrists and therapists and support groups, take medication, and you know, life threw me another curveball. The end of last year, you know, I'm doing all the things that I know I'm good about self-care. So end of last year, I fell into a depression worse than I'd ever had in my life. And suicidal, it was bad, and didn't know what to do. And it was really my beloved Summer, my sweetheart, and my eldest brother, John, who's my dad. They were the ones to do the research, because you're like, okay, well, you're already doing meds and counseling, and you're doing all this, like, what's left? And there was one thing, call it ECT, electroconvulsive therapy, shock therapy. What I can tell you, Shannon, 32 sessions later, the most recent was last Friday, changed my life. So what happens is I go in and I meet my amazing doctor, Dr. Marasa, and she'll talk with me and, you know, from how have I been between, you know, last session and this session. And then they put electrodes around my head. At the same time, the anesthesiologist, who's to my right, is putting the IV in, because they're going to do general anesthesia. And we'll have some conversation, and they always say the same thing. They'll say, are you ready? And I say, yeah. And the anesthesiologist, Shannon, always says the same thing, and I love it. He says, are you ready for your nap? I said, yes, I am. And so they put me to sleep, and then I wake up in recovery, just like anybody else coming out of general anesthesia. It takes a little while. But, you know, I don't hurt. I don't have a headache. You know, my vision is fine. And then I go home. So what happens is, while I'm asleep, they initiate, cause, whatever verb you want to use, me to have a seizure. The seizure is between 30 and 45 seconds. And then seizure's done. And then I go into recovery, and that's it. And it is, and I'm sure I could do all the research, but I really don't care, to be honest. But it has been so profound in the difference that it has made in my life. So now I'm a champion for ECT, because it has terrible stigma and terrible fear. And I was afraid too. I'm like, what, you're going to shock me? Like, why would that work? I can manage this. Like, that's what this therapy has done for me. It's incredible. I'm amazed. You know, I talked about my beloved brothers in this, my eldest, my dad, in this, since the end of last year, moving forward, we've always been close. But you know how my day starts every single day since then? It's a text from him. And the text is what he's doing that day, some guidance for me, what he would suggest, and always a motivational quote. And then every night, you know what we do? We talk on the phone. And then I have this woman, this extraordinary woman that I get to share my life with. And Deanna and I never had children. Summer has 3 beautiful children who live. I get to share their lives too. And they've been incredible. One of the things in my talks, so the base talk that I give is called The Why of Suicide and the How of Hope. And so an answer is really 4 things. It's the first half is really about the problem, and the second half is, okay, well, how could we respond maybe in a different way? So the first is like, what happened? I talk about genetics, and talk about trauma, and then talk about like, what does it feel like to describe so people can understand it? And then I pivot at self-care, talk about body, mind, and spirit. Like, what do you need to do to be well? And it's to work. And then like, what can we do in response to this crisis of suicide? Like, what can we do? Is there anything we can do? And I'm like, there actually is. Something really incredibly simple and unbelievably powerful. And it's all about creating connection, like the officer did with me, every place you go. And because connection creates this thing called hope. I define connection as the energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued, when they can give and receive without judgment, and they derive strength and sustenance from the relationship. So I do a lot of work with the military, which is so great because I feel like, so dad, eldest brother, 42 years in the Army. Enlisted, became a 2-star general. So finished the brief, and I had done several briefs, and it was at the end of the day, and Colonel Trout said, David, would you please come into my office? And I said, absolutely, sir. So I come, and he says, David, says, I am really proud of you. And he said, your briefs, we don't hear this kind of brief in the Army. It's totally different. And just thank you for taking care of my soldiers. But he said, David, there's a part, though, that I'm really angry about. And I remember I was like, oh, wow, I must have said something wrong. He says, David, what happened to you as a scout, I can't accept that. He says, David, I was an Eagle Scout. And he said, David, who I am as a battalion commander, as a father, as a husband, as a soldier, like the best parts of who I am, I learned in the Boy Scouts. I learned as an Eagle Scout. And to think what happened to you, it rips my heart out. He took his hand and took out his wallet. And he opened up his wallet, and he's facing away from me, and he pulls out, looks like he's pulling out a credit card. So I'm a little confused. He said, David, when you become an Eagle Scout, they give you this. And he turns the card around, and it's the size. He said, David, this is an Eagle Scout card. I got this card on November 3rd, 1998. I always had it with me. If you talk to any Eagle Scout, they always have their Eagle Scout card. It's really, really, really important. And then he gave me the card, and I looked at it, and I'm like, wow. I said, sir, it's really, really important. I totally get it. And I go to give the card back, and he says, no, you keep it. You've earned it. So I have Colonel Trouse's Eagle Scout card. And that amazing man, in trying to do something to take away what had happened to me, gave me a part of himself. That's the kind of thing that we can do for each other. This man, pretty amazing. And I'm a guy was married to this extraordinary woman, and I took care of dying animals. And I have a hard time with my self-esteem. No, I am part of a lawsuit my beloved brother Tom, this was some years ago, read something, about there was a law firm that won a landmark case so it's interesting to note. So they won a landmark case in which they Supreme Court ruled that the Boy Scouts had to give over all these files, and they became known as the perversion files. So my beloved brother, wanting to take care of his baby brother, said, hey, you should, maybe, and I don't remember the guy's name, So I joined and, I've gone through the interviews, and the law firm's been wonderful in the way that they've handled it, very kind and supportive, and they asked more or less, they wanted, not needed, but it would be helpful for your individual case if you had some proof you were in the Boy Scouts. And I'm like, remember, and incredibly, God love my beloved, remembered seeing these 2 pictures of me in my Boy Scout uniform. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe. I've never felt like I was being dissuaded from emoting in a certain way or dissuaded from a certain course of action or anything like that. I've never felt like that at all. I've been blessed to meet some amazing people. For me, I just want to make my contribution to the world is to make suicide prevention doable. Life has blessed me with an ability in the talk. It's story after story after story after story after story. I haven't used PowerPoints or anything like that. And most of the stories are animal stories from the sanctuary. And I use those to make a point. Like the short version of a quick one about names and why they're so important. And what I tell people is when you remember somebody's name, that's what you give them. You give them respect. You're seeking to understand them. You're looking for the truth of who they are, and you're honoring their presence. That's what you do. And I get to honor my former wife, my former bride, because all the greatness that we did, and the way that we took care of all these old dying animals was all because of Deanna. For me, I feel like I feel like who I am is because of the people in my life, and I want to do them proud and just show up and thank you.